So we're kicking off, or sort of re-kicking as well, series that we had begun a while ago, but incredibly timely and more so by the day, which has to do with the modernization of the enterprise through intelligent process automation and SharePoint. So hybrid is alive and well. SharePoint is alive and well. But the question that we're going to look at in the series is really revolves around what are your options to get ready, to be ready, to scale, and how to create a modern enterprise. And so we're going to review some of the basics of what we consider those decision and business decision points are. And then as we go through the series, call out different examples of the implementation of modern approaches to enterprise. So a little housekeeping up front. Gig Werks, we've been around for quite some time. We're starting to close in at about 20 years of operation. We've been working with SharePoint as a prime focus of our shop for many years, starting back in 2005. And so with it, we've worked very tightly within the community, great relationships with inside Microsoft, all the stuff you would expect a high-end boutique to offer to the marketplace. Won a number of awards over the year, and we work very closely with Nintex. And as part of our journey as a systems integrator and provider of business solutions to our clients, we went out of our way to identify what tools would work best for our client, what would reduce risk, increase value, why build custom solutions when there's great third parties in the marketplace. And Nintex is really at the fore of that and the premier third-party solution provider, not just for SharePoint, but also for Salesforce and throughout the extended ecosystem that the cloud now represents as Nintex continues to expand its capabilities and what we can then in turn deliver to our clients. So a brief review and important to note. So as the evolution of the cloud is more than a glorified NOC, right? It's not just a hosting center, and it represents a number of opportunities and challenges. And so with that, also different approaches to how you build solutions for the business, right? So, you know, how can we equip our sponsors in IT? How can we help our users within the business create solutions that are modern and scalable? And so in the past, you had monolithic solutions, and monolithic solutions were waterfall-based, server-side code, one-offs, very reliant on IT, and service interruptions, right? Every time you made an upgrade or a change, you had to really sort of bounce the box, as I would put it, and it prolonged the release and, frankly, the delivery of business value to the institution. It was also highly dependent on .NET. And so winding forward to where we are today and have been for the last couple of years, but with increasing efficacy and power, is app-based solutions or application, right? So we'll get into that in a moment about the modern app solution set. But with apps, sort of what's old is new again. There's nothing to be deployed on the farm. Everything goes through API calls, and the focus then can shift to where it really rightfully belongs, which is to satisfying the user experience, minimizing the involvement and overhead for IT, and frankly, business continuity, with nothing to deploy, with no deployment to your farm, no downtime as you deploy it. Also, the modern application paradigm represents a liberation from .NET technology. We are a .NET shop, but in an application set, we use Angular for the user experience, right? And so with it, you get to use not only .NET, but other toolkits that you have in shop. And with modern apps, you have the capability to build rapidly and deploy. In a word, agile, focused on delivery of solutions for the business by enabling IT to do what they do best. And so within the realm of SharePoint, you are stuck with WSPs. And as we work with our enterprise clients, we've been commissioned by a number at this point to help them get ready for the journey to the cloud, be it hybrid or an eventual full cutover. And WSPs were how you built custom features. God knows we built a slew of them over the years. And they were deployed on the farm level. And they typically would connect to your SQL. They would have features around site provisioning or external sharing and low-level customizations. But with that, there are a lot of disadvantages. You're limited to what versions of .NET based upon your farm. You can't use the latest and greatest in development technologies. And the fact is one WSP that you deploy may in fact interfere with another one that was working just handy dandy previously, and so there's a lot of potential risk and downtime. Everything from conflicts between WSPs that just don't work well together and destabilize your farm, as well as difficulty in upgrades. You go from 2010 to 2013 to 2016. Will that WSP work? Does it really scale? And do you have to cycle the farm? And these are some glaring disadvantages around WSPs. Right, and so an extended list, we'll distribute this deck to those of you on the call today. But these farm level customizations were just what they are. They are highly, highly intrusive and very developer intensive for maintenance. Another thing we witnessed in working with clients over the years is the sheer cataloging and documentation of inventory of these WSPs. Number of our clients, great shops, great customers, they go, oh, we have 20, and then you find 200. It's a very difficult thing to maintain, even if you're using TFS, as to that full lineage. And then ripping it out of the environment has the same sort of risk that we just enumerated a moment ago. And here's the big one. It just will not work in hybrid or cloud. So even if you have the skill set and the experience writing WSPs, if you're going to go and continue to build your own solution set, why not build for something modern, which is essentially 2013 and beyond. And so start building today for what you're going to do tomorrow. And that's concerted and honest advice that we offer people. Now, the modern app model, which has emerged over the years, is API driven. Obviously, with Office 365 essentially being multi-tenant, not even essentially, it's what it is, you can't make farm-level deployments. And so Microsoft was faced with the realization that to allow their customers to enjoy the customizations that we're used to on-premise, they had to come out with essentially the app model. And you can build this on your own. We've helped clients do that. But going back to reinventing the wheel, and Nintex, the premier third party for that ecosystem, why do that when you have products like Nintex and our own product, Project Ready, for different applications, when they're there already? And Nintex allows you to do agile, rapid development, satisfy those users, and really create what we refer to as that retail effect, something that's completely user-driven and satisfies the user rapidly. So the platform itself is incredibly feature-rich. It continues to expand exponentially over time. And so there's the Workflow Cloud, which is agnostic of platform. So Salesforce, other systems, you don't need to have SharePoint. But of course, as it relates to that, product is tried and true as well. There's Nintex Hawkeye. Now, Hawkeye was a huge value add, at least by my eye, in that reporting traditionally has been based around, basic metrics of performance of workflow firing. But what does that do for your business? Going back to that retail effect, you want to show value back to the business. The business wants to know the impact of what processes you've automated, what you've streamlined. Well, Hawkeye is process analytics, and we'll give you a couple of examples of this in a moment. But what's more important than knowing that a travel request went through in 15 milliseconds is how many travel requests are going to Asia to sell this item that has this return on value for the business. That is truly, truly powerful reporting, and again, is user-centric within that presentation. Then there's the App Studio, which allows you to build comprehensive mobile and forms. Nintex forms themselves, so very easy designer. And again, mobile with offline capabilities, whole bunch of great stuff. And then extensions. So extensions allow you to hit other cloud services and applications seamlessly so that you can present a single application solution, reduce the number of points that your users have to touch, and really build a much more powerful integrative solution, which we think that as we show you Salesforce integration and contract generation, we'll give you one example of the value of modernization. And then Nintex document generation. At the end of the day, the world is paper-driven, even if it's virtual paper. Now that you have data and approvals, wouldn't it be nice to actually create the content dynamically based upon rules, reduce risk, and then really satisfy, again, the end user's efficiency of their day? So there are all these legacy approaches that we referenced above, put in the context of Nintex though. They were rigid and transactional, programmer-centric, and the time to value is endless. And this is, again, something that we see endlessly within our own practice, is the drive toward agile, minimally viable, cycling budgets, getting stuff to the user easily. And if you're going through that monolithic approach that I had referenced earlier, well, that's very difficult to achieve. And so if you use Nintex with all the pre-built connections and drop and drag visualization, it really is built for agile and for expedited delivery to the customer. So just a panel I'll keep up here. There we go. Thank you, PowerPoint. We'll distribute this. I'm not going to read this graph at you. But here are a number of different ways that you can leverage the product. Please do look at this at your leisure off the decks that we'll distribute to you at the end of the cast. Some logos, or rather some connection points, rather, as to what Nintex will drive for you in terms of interoperability. This is an old panel. It has expanded since then. It's all we can do but to keep up. But this is out-of-the-box connectivity that will allow you to glue together, if you will, these different platforms, the data that's locked in them, and then really give business to an application for your users by easily connecting these data points into coherent and comprehensive solutions. So let's get to the example for today, which is around contract lifecycle management. This is something that Nintex themselves speak quite a bit about. This is something that was particularly exciting to Gig Werks going back over the years when they first announced their new document generation capabilities, and something we saw just huge need for inside the marketplace. Gig Werks, among its many skill sets, has always had a long focus on document management and control as if nothing else, just something we like to do that we find of interest. So the basic workflow of this is we're going to initiate a contract from CRM, in this case Salesforce. We're going to programmatically create the contract with the correct data, pass it around for signatures and approval, and then be able to report on it. And I'm going to give you a quick example of how that works. So for one, another big part of the value proposition of Nintex as it relates to it is, you know, how many user interfaces do you have to go? It's like the old joke with the light bulb, right? Well, if your sales team is working in Salesforce, why make them leave? And so this is where you begin right out of the gate to see the power of Nintex. So here they are. They're in Salesforce. This is where they live and breathe all day. And from the sales rep's perspective, they don't care necessarily about legal's approval or any of the rest of it. They want to know that they have an opportunity, that the client wants to move ahead, and that they need a contract to do that. Why leave? So Salesforce, a very malleable product, you can create custom ribbons and actions in. And so here's a list of all the contracts for this particular user. We're using Richard Matzel, our marketing director, as the pseudonym for this user. And here, very quickly, very easily, they can see the status of all these different contracts that they have sent out there for approval and review without leaving Salesforce, even though these contracts are residing as a repository back inside SharePoint. To go ahead and now create a new one in their normal, create an event, a task, a custom, create new item, in this case, a contract. So just by selecting contract, and again, never leaving Salesforce, they're now presented with the requisite information that they're going to need to create the appropriate contract. So simple people pickers or account pickers, all the native fields, they can go in, do their lookups, all the stuff that Salesforce is already delivering to your users. So let's just click through pretty quickly. We'll accept executive towers. And with that, now the contract start date and end date. This is very important throughout contract lifecycle management, because if we put in the correct data, we can then apply rules that will manage the lifecycle of this particular content. So if we know the contract date is to start, X date, and it's a 12-month term, the inevitable, oh, geez, their contract expired, we never knew, goes away. Because now once we feed this data into the solution set, we'll be able to programmatically announce and re-up and cancel and all those things that are driven by the simplest thing of a start date and its termination date. How many months does it run? So let's go in and fill in some of these values very quickly. You know, we can tell the owner, do we want to put the expiration date in? And then we're going to put in other things, revenue and the like. And this is a mix and match. Some of this is data that you need just for the sales process, but a lot of this data will show you will end up in a contract programmatically at a later date. If by selecting executive towers, we knew the billing address, this would auto-populate just bread and butter to Salesforce itself. But as I said earlier, it's not much of a demo if we don't show something on the screen. Because the intent is the thing goes very quickly, but then I got nothing to show. We want to show that value. So now that this has been saved, here's all that information. And great, sales rep is done. They filled in the information. Now they can await for that contract to come to them, and they can view it again in that contracts tab that I showed you up here, so they can always stay lock and step with the process through its life cycle. So let's look a little bit behind the scenes of contract initiation. So very quickly, the point of this is most of this would just work programmatically. You wouldn't see a lot of what I'm about to show you. But for demo purposes, we're going to grab and key in the contract ID. This would have been passed programmatically. You can see the ID up here. But we want to have some visualization so we can show behind the scenes of how Nintex is handling a lot of this data. So again, this would be invisible. Your users would not come here to start a new workflow. Obviously, Nintex allows you to kick it off or to manually create workflows. But again, we're just going to go manual so that I have something to show. And we're going to click this workflow action to generate a new subscription agreement. I'm going to base this on our SaaS company project rating, so we don't violate anybody's whatever. And we're going to key in that Salesforce ID. Again, this would have just kicked over. The workflow would have brought it in. And then when we click Start, now the contract workflow will begin. So here are your contract records in our templates library. I'm going to show you a couple of these things. Also at the end of this, the template is going to fetch information that's stored in a list, combine it with information that we just exposed and showed inside Salesforce. This information is being maintained in a simple Word template. Your users are used to this. So if you had to change anything in that underlying template, let's take a look at it. It's easy enough. It's Word. But what you will see in here are item property tags. So this is nothing we would want your users to touch. But if your legal team wanted to go through, change any of the exhibits, whatever, you can build that template like you would normally build any other Word document, just being, paying attention to, not overriding item properties. This is something that a power user, again, this is non-code, you just have to understand Word. And so now that we have those different tags within the document and a good old Word template to refer to that is centrally managed and easy to update, we can now inject information from our clause library, from our Salesforce data, and then send it out to the contract library. Now, up here you can see subscription agreement. It's our master contracts library. And now we want to show the benefit of where SharePoint fits into this. We're very focused on and very adamant that you should not keep adding silos and more complicating overhead to your systems. You should use what you own to the best of its ability and to really extract that full value from the system. So if you look on the screen there, you'll see there are a number of previously executed contracts, and that contract date and term, expiration date, that's in here as well. And so when we filled out, it starts on this date and it's got a 12-month term, the system knew what the renewal date was, calculated it for us. And again, we don't have this in this demonstration, but from here, you would peg a number of things that you would want to happen. A notification, the contract is about to expire. Or we're running records retention, and we want to move this to a different repository and obsolescence when statutory is over, 7 years, whatever it may be. So we were able to capture that data, calculate, and take further action. And also, the other thing is, as it relates to SharePoint itself, again, you can co-author, you have the availability of the search, your users aren't learning something new for that contract lifecycle management. So the people who are used to SharePoint, nothing to learn. People used to Salesforce, nothing to learn. I've often said that really business continuity is far less about system failure, especially in the day and age of the cloud, and much more about the change of how to use systems. That's real business discontinuity, and that's where you start to get into all sorts of losses for the firm. So we've gone through that workflow, and I showed you the template with those empty identity tags, but now what you see is we have that requisite information already filled in. Okay, so scroll down, we'll see yet more of that information pre-populated, all authoritative, and even various clauses and information in here, the exhibits and the like. If you have a clause library and this is in the state of Connecticut and the exhibit should say something different, programmatically that would have been populated as well. So Nintex does all that assembly, pulls the data through, and then drops it back into our contracts library. And you can see the various meta values, and over time, as the workflows execute, again, earlier examples down here, all this stuff will just populate as it moves along. And again, leveraging SharePoint, it's very easy to search. So if my adjudicator of my contracts library, be it procurement or the legal department, wants to go very quickly and say, hey, I want to know everything that's signed, et voila, good old SharePoint, and now we can go in and find the signed documents very, very, very quickly. So we could filter, we could sort, we could co-author, we could take full advantage, nothing for my end user to learn that's new. And now let's go back in and check on that contract. So what you'll notice now is all that metadata that was previously missing, now that the workflow has run, has populated all these columns. So again, we can sort and filter and notify and all those things that are sort of bread and butter. And now let's take a look at a little bit of that workflow. So clicking on that, we can see the history as we go through this. Oops, sorry. No, I should not scroll. And what you'll see is this is, much more for the IT side, if you will. But here's the full lineage of, you can see all this information that was being pulled, the ID, where it was being written, at all the way down that list, is all the content that was ferreted into this document and that then provided the meta value therein. So let's go to the contracts records list. And let me show you that workflow itself. So Nintex installed. You can adjudicate who can see this stuff and if they can access these buttons, just before anybody asks. But this is our workflow, our contract records workflow. We can see the history of it, which is huge because you can have versions of these things. And Nintex itself allows you to save snippets, templates, libraries, and it's very easy to build these out. This is a WYSIWYG. There is no code involved in this process. So as I scroll down, and let's say we want to grab that first Salesforce record. There's your data binding here that allows you to do that. And then from there, we go to document generation. So bind the data, generate a PDF, generate that Word document. And here we can select the templates, the tagging of the document, etc., just from this very simple interface. And again, there's no Visual Studio or anything else involved in here. And if you wanted more templates, because you want NDAs, etc., this is where you could continue to add and create different templates. So you want 5 templates, 20, whatever it may be. Okay, so we started in Salesforce. We generated the subscription. We populated, we put it in the right library, we've tagged it. So what's left? What's left is getting the client to sign it so we can get paid. So with that, let me go in, and I'm going to send this out for signature. Again, we could do this programmatically, or you might want to control it. I have a nice little JavaScript button here, which will then allow you to fill out essentially the DocuSign workflow. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the SharePoint ecosystem, you can go, well, SharePoint itself already has the capacity on some level to integrate to DocuSign. What it won't do for you is bring back the attachment into the library extract the meta value, write it back to that list, et cetera, and so forth. And I'll show you that in the next couple of subsequent screens. But what Nintex really allows you to do is get rid of all the, so DocuSign's great, you send it out. How do you get it back in the system? How do you associate it with the original record? How do you make sure all the dates are correct? Well, it's a long, lengthy list that the Nintex component, that simple connector that they've had for the longest time, really alleviates a ton of overhead and, more importantly, risk. Fat fingering is never a good thing. So first sign-in, we'll make Christian, we'll put in his email address, and I'm not going to put secondaries or like, just out of benefit of time. And let me proceed. So DocuSign does its thing. You get the notification, please review it, please sign it. And this is good old DocuSign. And again, as noted, this is just leveraging what most people already own. It works. They have a connector for Adobe Sign too, if that's your preference. But we're just picking some SKUs here. And I'll go ahead and I'll continue. And I'll do the normal signatory process with inside DocuSign. So fill it out, sign it, etc., and so forth. And just to give you an example, here's a DocuSigned Master Services Agreement. And what you'll notice is the, all that other metadata, the Everbank, all that stuff is auto-populated. If I was able, this is a PowerPoint, if I was able to scroll to the right, we would see the date executed. And Nintex brought back in all that data in context of this document as well. And last but certainly not least is the reporting aspect that I pointed out at the beginning of the cast around reporting. When everything was server-side and server-intensive, and even to this day, I mean, it is important to understand from a technical perspective how workflows are performing, are they stalled? None of that goes away. I'm not poo-pooing that. But from a business value, because that's what this is all about, right? IT for its own sake is a trip to nowhere, right? It's all about the business. And so the business needs to stay informed. So in this workflow, what we had was Salesforce and DocuSign actions, right? And so Hawkeye allows you to drop in what are known as beacons so that you can gather data as that workflow proceeds to start to pull together some meaningful information. So let's look at this contract management process. So the draft, the review process, contract by time, by type, by priority, and it's pretty much whatever you can envision, right? So what contracts at what value take how long to execute really allows you to then make critical business decisions as to whether or not certain contracts, large or small, are even worth pursuing given the amount of overhead, just as an example, in that process. And you can drill in. So let's see, at the $106 million mark, what's that contract time to value? How long did it take to execute? Again, the worthwhileness of an account, and location. So if you're signing contracts throughout the world and you want to know what the different velocity of those are, well, it's obviously very effective to then be able to say, what's going on in APAC and EMA, et cetera, and so forth, or even down to a specific locale. So as I wind up here and go over to questions and answers, we have this deck. Please do fill out our questionnaire. At the tail end of this, what you'll find on this deck is a little bit about Nintex, some of their ever-expanding and growing logos, economic impact, because as you go to make the case internally, if you saw value here today, these are useful statistics for you to have. For those of you who we're hopefully intrigued today, and you want to see a little bit of a living demo, have some specific use cases and questions, that's what we're here for. And then we really hope to see some of you back, because again, the modernization of the enterprise is not something that's coming, it's here. And so we're going to continue this series with other examples of the way you can modernize the enterprise to satisfy end user needs rapidly. And so we'll have different use cases over the ensuing months as we work with our partner Nintex. And again, as always, we really do thank everybody for taking time out when they're having the sandwich or whatever, and do hope to see you again soon. Fill out the survey. Would love to get you this material. So thanks as always.